Welcome to Board Game Binge, the place where we bring you bite-sized, bingeable board game content from across the industry. I'm your host, James Staley, and in this episode, we're chatting with Joakim Engfors, a co-owner and designer at Mindgate Studios. His newest Viking-themed title, Feud: The Seer's Prophecy, is currently on Kickstarter. Joakim, welcome to the binge. How you doing, my friend?
I am great. Thank you, James. It's very exciting to be here. Thank you.
Oh, it is exciting to have you. I really appreciate it. It's we were able to connect through a mutual colleague, Joe Slack, who's been a guest host on this podcast. And oh man, it was so cool to have him connect us. When I was going through this campaign, we're going to get into the campaign in a bit, man, but there's some exciting elements I really want to dig into with you. But first and foremost, so you're in Germany right now, I guess, right?
Yes, that is correct.
But you're Swedish.
I am Swedish, moved to Germany about 6 years ago.
And what made you move to Germany?
Well, my wife is from Germany, and when we had our first child, we wanted our daughter to grow up with her cousins, because
nice.
My wife's brother has kids in similar age, so we just figured let's give it a try.
Oh, that is amazing. My kids and their cousins are roughly the same age, and we live maybe 6 blocks from each other. So growing up, the kids always had a chance to play together, and it is amazing how close of a bond they form when they're close in age and they're playing together and constantly seeing each other. So that's probably a great decision for you guys to do that for the sake of your kids. What do you like? What's your day job? Is it just board games, or do you do other stuff as well?
No. Board games is not much of an occupation yet, but I'm a social worker. I visit at-risk youth or families that need support in different ways, or I meet with refugees, and I have a lot of different jobs inside of that. Yeah.
And how did you get into that? Was that something through schooling, or?
That is, I kind of slid into that by mistake almost. I was studying computer game development at university in Sweden, and I was a little bit unhappy with the type of education that was, and a friend of mine asked if I want to have a job. I was like, well, what is it? And that's how it started. I started working at the youth center in Sweden, or a couple of youth centers, and that's pretty much when I realized that this is something that I want to continue doing.
Do for a career. Wow. And then, is board gaming been part of your whole life, or is this something you've got into more recently, or how'd you get into board gaming?
So board gaming in particular, I've always been into it. We didn't have super much growing up. We had this classic like Risk and
Monopoly,
and like a lot of card games and stuff. But I was always into gaming in general, like video games, computer games. So that's definitely was always part of my identity, I would say.
And then when did you jump into the more recent hobby, and what was the gateway game that got you there?
That was probably Magic the Gathering. That was, again, my wife's brother introduced it to me, and we were immediately hooked, and then we were poor. No, that's... after that, we just discovered more and more games, and yeah.
And then grew from there. And then Mindgate Studios is now. I think I saw on your page there. Is there some other people like you're a partner in that? There's someone else that partners with you in that company, or?
Yeah, so the way Mindgate Studio works is when I was reaching out to different manufacturers in China for the game that I'm currently running on Kickstarter, a lot of them wouldn't deal with just private people. You needed to have a business. So then we talked a little bit, and my wife's brother and I decided to start a company together because he also has a lot of ideas, and we figured let's go on this journey together. And then we had some more people coming in and help us along the way.
And during COVID, so I imagine most of this design was during COVID. Is that when you guys kind of put this whole thing together?
No, actually, I mean the Mindgate Studios, yes, was around that time, but we were actually already considering launching right before COVID hit.
Yeah.
But then COVID hit and everything just got way too expensive. And we have a pretty niche game with a small target audience, and it's quite expensive. So we decided to just wait because I want the game to get out to as many people as possible. So it's important to keep the costs down.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Where'd the idea for your game come from?
So that has a little bit to do with me being a sore loser, I think, because playing Magic, like we talked about, or Hearthstone, or Faria, or any of these card games where you're drawing a card every turn, or you're drawing a few cards every turn. I was always very happy when I won at those games, but every time I lost, I got frustrated because I told myself, well, I only lose because you keep drawing the cards you need. You're so lucky. And I was really sometimes quite annoyed and childish, but that kind of also inspired me to try to come up with a different system where every turn you can just decide what card you draw. And that's how it all started. I just had the idea, and I think 2 days later we were playing the first prototype. It was all just from papers that had been cut up and written on, and very, very basic. But and since then I couldn't stop. I just kept going. It was I really loved the idea, and I've been trying to make that experience as good as I can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say for anybody that is aspires to be a game designer and want to know where to start, a great place to start is take a game that you have frustrations with and figure out how you would change it to make it work more for you. And this is one of the first things I ever did, right? When I created a board game, it was like an anti-Monopoly game. I took everything about Monopoly that I absolutely hated, and I had put it into adjusting this game, right? So when you play it, it's got some Monopoly vibes to it for sure. But I changed it to deal with all the frustrations I had, like people fighting over who got to be the car. Well, everybody got a car in my version, right? Trading. I traded with my dad, and he would always kind of screw you over by trying to give you a cheaper property for a more expensive property, right? And there's never fair, balanced deals. So I made all properties the same value, so that it was shares, so that they traded evenly and so forth. And although that's not a game I would ever put out there, because again, the style of the game is very much circa 70s and 80s. It got me started down the path of creating games and putting ideas down and creating something physical. And you can still do that today. There's still games I'll get on Kickstarter sometimes, and I sit down to play it. It's like, gosh, either this wasn't play tested enough, this game, or maybe I just don't get the way they wrote the rules. But sometimes what we'll do is we'll homebrew it, right? And we'll say, okay, we don't. This thing over here is not really working, but let's homebrew it so that we can get this so it's something functional that we can actually enjoy and play. And I've got 3 games on my shelf right now that we've done that with. So it's a good place to start. So it's kind of cool to hear someone else say that. To say, I had frustrations in my gaming, and that led me down this path to create something new that was going to be fun for me in my play style, right?
Yeah.
And then why a duel? So you chose this kind of a which is not typical, right? When I look at games now, most games are 4, 5, 6 players or solo versions. And of course you have your co-ops and so forth. There's not many, I would say, 2-player versus games that I'm seeing like this, or battle type games. What was the thinking behind that?
So, James, I just wanted to make the game that I loved playing. And I had absolutely no intentions of ever getting this far with it. There was just I had a challenge, and I went I started obsessing over it, and I wanted to work on it, but I never imagined taking it this far ever.
Yeah.
But I can tell you, James, all my other games after this will be a lot easier to sell, I believe.
That's the thing sometimes, the genre, right? You have to make those decisions. I ran into that recently with Tanks But No Thanks, which is one of our first games we launched. And it's a tank skirmish battle game, very much an American style type game. And it's one of our better selling titles, right? So we sold out of it worldwide. We're looking at doing a second print, and I've been going through the process of deciding, do I Kickstarter this or do I Kickstarter something else? And when I have to compare that versus a Euro, and which will probably do better on Kickstarter, it keeps getting pushed further down the list, right? And it kills me to do it because I've got such heart and passion behind this particular title, being the first one. But sometimes you have to kind of put in the practicality of it, right? And kind of look at, okay, if we're now not just doing a passion project, but now we're going to chart this out as a business going forward, what makes most sense to launch and when, right? And I imagine when, like people like yourself, right, where you're not just one game now, you're probably thinking longer term now as a company, how are we going to map out the titles over time? That definitely comes into play now as to, what am I going to launch and when, right?
Yeah.
So your Kickstarter campaign right now, I'm just going to switch gears really quickly. Anybody that's looking live or on the replay, Feud, the Seer's Prophecy. So what the name alone, give me some insight into where that came from.
I wanted a short name, and I wanted it to kind of reflect what you're doing in the game. So pretty quickly landed on Feud.
Yep.
And I was already pretty set early on the Viking theme. And I don't remember how we came with the Seer's Prophecy as a subtitle. Maybe we were already watching the Vikings show. Is that old?
Vikings, yeah, maybe.
It could be. The Seer's Prophecy. I mean, it just sounded cool. I don't have a great reason.
That's
I wanted
right.
to have a name that is short, and I wanted it to kind of explain a little bit what you're doing and why. So that's how we landed on Feud, the Seer's Prophecy.
It certainly looks really cool, and I'm going to get you to walk us through kind of the essence of how you play this game. And then I'm going to jump into some of the components that kind of really popped out to me that I want to kind of hone in on. But why don't we start off at the top as to how do 2 people play this? So it's a 40-minute game. Walk us through kind of the gist of how someone would play this game.
So the game, in terms of what the players have to do, is really, really simple. Deciding what or how to do those things, that's where the challenge comes. So on your turn, basically each player, they have a village that is split up into different zones. There's 6 different zones in your village that you can move your characters between. And every every zone triggers a certain effect, and the effect is stronger the more characters are in that zone. So you could, for example, send your characters to the market, and for every card that you play in the market, you gain 1 silver on your turn. And then you could put the character into the Sacred Grove, which give you another resource, which is called Insight. And so you just, on the start of your turn, you have a set of units on your board. It starts small, but it will grow over time. And then you can move every card 1 space. And after you've done that, you trigger all the zones, and then it's the other player's turn.
And then how do you battle? So how does the battle work?
Yeah, so one of the zones on this playmat is called Battlefield. And for every unit you put into the battlefield, you can send that unit into your opponent's village and attack them. And the way the combat works is that to defend against an attacker, you need to have your own units either in the battlefield or placed on the wall, which gives them an additional advantage when defending. And the attacking player, so all the cards have different values, different costs, different attack values, different health. Most of them also have a special ability. And when you do combat, you just look at the attack value of a card, and that card will deal that much damage to whichever unit is blocking that attacker. But it is similar to in Magic the Gathering and a lot of other card games where the defending player decides, if you have options, if you have multiple units on the wall, you could decide which unit should block which attacker.
So you can pick who you're going to sacrifice in that particular attack, essentially.
Yes, or hopefully someone that is strong enough to survive the attack.
Yeah. What I thought was really cool was it very much has at least the table setup had a bit of a Dominion vibe to me. And I'm showing on screen right here, but there's kudos to you. You've got neoprene mats in the box, which is awesome because I hate it when the neoprene mats are outside the box. And so you've got one master neoprene mat that has kind of all these stacks of potential people you can recruit, I guess, right, from the market.
Yeah. And so that one,
Yeah, and it's a common market, right, that everybody's choosing from the same thing. And as you take a card, then it reveals a card below it. Is that kind of how that works?
So the on the tavern mat, which we call it, there are these units placed out face up, and there's 4 copies of them. So if a player takes one, there's just 3 more underneath. So it's similar to in Dominion how the shop works there, where you put out a certain amount of cards, and when that pile is empty, you just have to find something else to do. And you can also see on the tavern mat, there's also, each player has 2 hidden decks. The decks are the same for both players, but it's gonna be, so when you draw a card, you can always choose which card you draw, or which cards, if you want to draw multiple cards.
I see.
Again, this goes back to where you place your units. If you place enough units in the homestead, you're just gonna draw 1 card per unit you have in the homestead. So some turns you might draw 1 card, other turns you draw 3 or 5. And every time you draw a card, you could either take one of the units, the ones that are face up, and for those you have to pay immediately the cost that they have, and or you could select to take one of those face down cards. So there's 2 different ones. There are the prophecy cards, which are one-time effects. You can take the card and then you put it into your hand, and anytime you want, you can play it. It can be on your turn, another player's turn, and when you play it, that's when you have to pay for the actual cost. And those could be something like deal damage to a unit, or give a unit extra armor or extra attack until end of turn, things like that. And then the third type of card is the knowledge card, which are the blue ones. Those will also go face down onto the board, and whenever you want, just like with the prophecy cards, you can turn them face up. When you turn them face up, you will reveal an effect that will stay for the rest of the game. So it's like a ongoing effect that will help you hopefully win the feud. And these cost a different resource. They don't cost silver, but they cost this insight resource, which you collect in the Sacred Grove.
Mm-hmm.
And insight also has another use, which is it works as a prerequisite for a lot of cards. Meaning, if you want to play a strong unit, maybe you only have to pay 3 silver, but you first need to get up to 4 insight or 5 insight. And if you don't have that insight, you just cannot recruit that unit. But the moment you play these knowledge cards face up, then you will pay the insight. So otherwise, it's just a threshold that you need to reach. But the moment you play a knowledge card, you will spend that resource, and then you have to build it up again if you want to have access to those more powerful cards.
And then I'm also showing on screen here the sorting tray, which again, that's what gave me kind of that Dominion vibe. Man, does this ever look awesome! It's a big box too, right? Like when you see the kind of the gif of you kind of unpacking the box. Like, there's a lot in this box, yeah?
There is a lot. And this, again, goes back to what I said earlier when I said something along the lines of, I'm going to make games that are easier to sell in the future. Mm-hmm. I didn't mean I'm going to create games. I will still create games that I want to play myself. But I now know a lot about the manufacturing process, the shipping process, all those things that I completely disregarded in the beginning because I was just doing this for myself and tried to make. And I hate when the neoprene mats are rolled up somewhere. I want them in the box.
Yeah.
So that was very important to me. But that means you need to have a large box, and it gets quite expensive. So
you have 3 neoprene mats too, right? It's not just one.
I have, and they're large.
Yeah,
they're very large.
Yeah, each player has their, and I'm going to show this on screen one more time just because, again, I don't want this to be lost on people. This shocked me when I saw this. I was like, holy crap. Like, I assume they are just kind of like regular player mats, like almost like a board. And then when I scrolled down and saw that these were neoprene, I was like, whoa, like these are 3 large neoprene mats in this box. So each person with their village, it's on a neoprene mat. And you're kind of facing off. Then you have the one common mat with the market in it, which was quite impressive. Not cheap, as you said. I mean, I've done neoprene mats in one of my games, and it is, it's not. You can't take the cost of neoprene lightly. It is an expensive component. But man, does it ever increase the table presence, right, when you're playing, and especially with cards like this, when you're constantly putting cards down onto the table,
exactly,
picking
and
those
you
cards
will move
up,
them.
Yeah, it's going to be so much easier, and they're going to kind of stay in place until you're ready to move them versus putting them on a table, right?
Yeah, so in Feud, every turn you will be moving cards around, you'll be placing new cards, move them. So the mats were just something that I always use for myself when playtesting and so on, and then I didn't want to let go of it.
Yeah.
Had to make it work.
So how does your brother-in-law kind of fit into all this? So like, have you guys kind of split the company roles and responsibilities up? Like what does he handle versus what you handle, or do you guys both work on kind of everything, or how's that work?
So we are mostly doing our own things, but we're of course helping each other a lot. Like he's playtesting a bunch, I'm playtesting his things, and he's just working on his things, and we're also working on some things together. We just wanted to have something that we can call ours. Like we both put out things that we're both proud of, and we want to like help each other promote those things, and that's pretty much how it goes.
And what's been the biggest learning for you, would you say, going into this this Kickstarter campaign?
So I feel like I've been doing research for years about going live on Kickstarter, so a lot of it was I was well aware. I feel I was well prepared, but you get tired It's a lot of sleepless nights. We're only 1 week in, and I'm feeling it. I'm feeling it. I knew it would be hard, but it's really hard. And you're constantly checking, did we get any other backers? And I think once I fund, I will probably be motivated to just keep. I mean, I'm already really motivated,
Yeah.
but it's gonna kind of give me a moment to breathe.
Yeah.
And then like just keep going to hit those stretch goals.
Yeah, I don't think it can be understated that when you run a campaign, the toll that it takes on you of just that constant kind of little bird on the shoulder saying, hey, check the page, check the page, check the page. Well, imagine doing that for a month, right? Like you're constantly all day long checking your page. I mean, the first 48 hours are a complete write-off, but even throughout the month, that's the part I find the most exhausting because it's tough to work on other stuff while you're constantly, part of your brain is focused on where are we with this campaign? How's the campaign doing? I will say, I mean, it's not a question of if, it's when you fund. I mean, I'm going to put this in Canadian dollars just so our listeners understand, and it's the only way I can see it, quite frankly. Your goal is 23,500 Canadian dollars. You're already at 19,371. The math alone, and people listen to the podcast know, your day one funding, typically you're going to hit that 50% of that in the last 72 hours as well. So just based on that math alone, I mean, it's not a question of if you're going to fund, you are going to fund. It's just a matter of how much over your funding goal you're going to go, right? So that should give people confidence that, when they back you, that they are going to get this game, and it's, it's not a wasted pledge, that this is something that is going to come to fruition. And certainly you guys have put a lot of effort into it. I mean, the video on the page is great. Who did you use for your animation?
So that's another thing. I have tried to save money everywhere I can. Mm-hmm. I didn't know anything of Blender, but I did everything myself. I mean,
oh, wow.
I have a friend who helped every time I had a question. Friend was there to help me. So I'm super proud of how it turned out. I'm really, really happy with the GIFs in it, because it's expensive to hire someone to do these things for you, and I would rather use that money on ads to try to find more backers. But no, this has been a great learning experience, if nothing else, and I feel like I'm very happy with how everything's going right now.
Yeah, and no disservice to video creators, because I know and you even have one, Ori Kagan commented on your page on how impressed he was with your box insert. But it is expensive, right? Doing animation for a page, doing GIFs, things like that. Any of these things you can do yourself. I think you hit it on the head. If you can take that money and pour that into ads, it is going to give you a much greater return than just things looking a little bit sexier, right? And part of what I do with my videos, and I've done 5 campaigns now, is I bootstrap them every time. So I do them myself, and it's always the majority of the video will be shot practically, and then whatever my limited skills help me do to add another kind of effects, I do that to kind of build the story. And then I dump all the rest of the cash into ads. And because ads, at the end of the day, if you can set your return on spend correctly, and if you get the ads to perform, you optimize them, I mean, those things can scale, right? Much better than say a video will do if you're spending, dumping $5,000, for instance, into a video. So kudos to you for that. What comes after this? So what's next for you guys? So are you going to launch something together? Do you have another game that you're working on that's going to be launching after this one? Or are you just focusing on this? Like, what's the plan going forward?
So currently there is a lot of focus on this, obviously, Feud. And another thing that we're working on right now is actually not a board game, but a digitalization of a board game. We're working on a digital version of a game called Tapestry. And that's going to need a lot of our attention. We're very happy with how far we've come. And we're looking forward to the day we can reveal more about that.
Yeah. Well, for people who want to follow this campaign or check it out, we will put a link in our show notes. You can find it very easily just by typing in Feud, quite frankly, on Kickstarter, and it comes up as one of like 5 options that have that name in it. So definitely easy to find. If they want to find your actual website, I believe, how do people find your website? I think it's mindgate-studios.com, I believe, right?
That is correct. You've done your research.
And if they want to follow you on social media, how best do they do that?
Yeah, just find Mindgate Studios. That's where I'm mostly active, I believe. I'm not very active on social media, but we're trying.
Always something that most people, even myself, you can always do more, right? Absolutely. Yeah. Well, Joakim, I want to wish you all the best on this campaign. I am so excited for you guys. It looks super cool. Congrats on the box and the neoprene mats, and just the table presence alone on this thing looks phenomenal. Again, if people want to check out it in the show notes, I put a link. Simply go there, click that. You can find it. All the best to you and your family in this coming year.
Thank you so much. Have a good night.
No worries, my friend. Take care. Cheers. This has been an episode of the Board Game Binge podcast, hosted by James Staley, produced by James Staley and Mike Bruner, with original music by Nick Smith. If you would like to watch these interviews live, simply subscribe to our YouTube channel, Board Game Binge, and you'll get access to live interviews, giveaways, and interesting board game content from across the industry. I can't wait for you to join us. See you next time.